Great. All right. So with that, I will go to our presentation without further ado, because we have lots to cover and I'm very interested in actually hearing about this for our EV fleet electrification tools and opportunities with ICF and Electrification Coalition. They're going to be providing an overview of SRP's fleet assessment study incentives program and highlighting how cities can certainly take advantage of this, as well as we've got Jared Walker and Cher Griffith, who are with the Electrification Coalition, providing an overview first of the drive tool to help cities evaluate their own fleet electrification opportunities. And of course, with ICF, we have Billy Vaughn and Andrew Varney. I did include their bios with the Eevee. And so I'd like to give them each an opportunity to introduce themselves just briefly before we have the Electrification Coalition start with their presentation. Of course, Karen and Danae, if you have any introductory remarks you'd like to add, please feel free to do so. So I'm going to start with Jared, if you would like to introduce yourself to the group, and then we'll go to Cher, and then we can go to Billy, and then Andrew.
Great. Thanks so much, Anne. And thanks again for organizing all of this. Jared Walker, I'm a senior program specialist at the Electrification Coalition. I work alongside Cher with cities across the country that are interested in deploying electric vehicles. And so that can entail everything from how do we get started to where do we put charging, what vehicles do we pick, all the way down the line to, hey, we've got 50 electric vehicles. How do we continue to expand into medium duty, heavy duty, transit buses, school buses, everything? And yeah, it's an honor to be a part of this meeting, and I'll hand it over to Cher.
Awesome. Thanks, Jared. And thank you to Anne and Karen for connecting us. And thank you for tuning in this afternoon, everybody. Thank you. So yeah, I'm Cher's colleague at the Electrification Coalition. My name is Cher Griffith Taylor. I'm also a senior program specialist like Jared. We work on the programs team at the Electrification Coalition, the EC as we call it. We're based in Washington, DC. That's where I'm coming to you from. And we're a national nonprofit that is totally focused on accelerating EV uptake, EV adoption in this country. And so, yeah, Jared and I, we work on programs with different public fleets. So usually it's municipalities, but really all public fleets, that's really our domain. But we help them with everything from fleet electrification, which is which is the remarks we're going to give today, but also on EV adoption programming, kinds of programs that municipalities, that jurisdictions can undertake to improve and enhance equity to secure the benefits for a number of different consumers. Yeah, and that's it really. Thank you again for having us this afternoon. Do I pass it to Andrew?
That works. And then we'll go to Billy after that.
Yeah, I can jump in. Hi, everyone. Andrew Varney. I work at ICF. So we are partnering with SRP to provide fleet assessments. Billy Vaughn is on the implementation side of things. I am working more heavily on these fleet assessments and providing those fleet assessments to different municipalities. I also work on lots of other utility programs across the country. So taking some of those lessons learned from other utilities, seeing if those same lessons learned and incentive programs and all kinds of different programs can be implemented in the Arizona area. So yeah, at ICF, it's great to be able to work at all these different utilities and try and take what works from one area and try and bring it to another. Billy, if you're still with us, you can jump in.
I am indeed. Thank you, Andrew. My name is Billy Vaughn. I work for ICF, and I implement the SRP electrification and electric vehicle charging rebate programs. And I see Brian Bedner's on. Brian and I work together a lot, and we've met with many of you municipalities that are on this call even, and we'll dive into a little bit more of what the offerings are. but we're excited to be here and talk to you about kind of version 2.0 of our electric vehicle program, which is the fleet assessment, and that's kind of what's driving the train for us this year. And look forward to visiting with you for the next few minutes.
I'll just add that we've worked with Billy and Andrew, or at least with Billy and Brian, on some other SRP offerings and have been very pleased and happy with the results. And we hope to be working with them on their fleet assessments from the City of Phoenix perspective in the future. And my peer, Sarah Carter from Aviation Department, they took a whack at the drive tool from Electrification Coalition, did it in-house. So we have been experiencing and experimenting with the DRVE tool from Electrification Coalition. So certainly these are great tools. We wanted to bring these offerings to the work group and share the knowledge and expertise that these programs can help with. Danae, anything from you to add?
I'll just echo what Karen said, and for any cities that haven't had the opportunity to work with Billy and Brian, they're super friendly and personable, so do reach out and they'll help answer any questions you have on that Eevee rebate program. Andrew, I haven't worked with you directly yet, but I'm sure you would also be more than happy to help. And so we look forward to hearing more about the offerings, and then really excited to have Electrification Coalition share what they've been working on and how they're providing a lot of resources for municipalities across the nation to push the needle forward on this. So thank you.
Great. So I think we'll go ahead and hand it over to Cher and Jared.
Sure. Yeah, thanks. So I'm going to kick it off with a little bit of focus on our drive tool, and then I'll hand it over to Cher to go through the Climate Mayors Collaborative, which is more of a procurement focus. And then also we'll touch a little bit on our city policy toolkit. We were kind of mentioning some of these toolkits earlier on, but yeah, thanks again for the kind words, Karen, our longtime friend, and I appreciate you looping us in. So with that, I'll dive in. A little bit of background, who we are. We are a national nonpartisan, not-for-profit group of business leaders. We're committed to promoting policies and actions that facilitate electric vehicles on a mass scale. So all of that is to say, we are a Washington, D.C. based nonprofit organization, and we work on many different levels of electrification. We've been in this space for about a decade at this point, so we've seen a lot of things change. We've seen a lot of great new opportunities to advance electrification, and I've got a couple of them listed here. Happy to talk more about any of these other programs as well offline, as our state and federal work too. So I like to break things down into kind of different segments. I like things in threes. And so I like to kind of kick things off when I'm working with a fleet. I'm just trying to understand what it is that we're working with, right? So we have to know what the fleet operational requirements are before we can make recommendations, and understand what these vehicles are going to be required to do on a daily basis, how long we're going to have the vehicles in the fleet, and other different characteristics of how we're procuring the vehicles, and things that we're really interested in focusing on in a particular vehicle class. And so one of the nice things that we've been able to develop over the past 2 years is our Drive software. So that is not Drive spelled incorrectly. It is actually Dashboard for Rapid Vehicle Electrification. This is a little bit of kind of background of how all of this came about. And honestly, 3 years ago, there was a conversation that was had at the ACT Expo in Long Beach with some folks from our organization and Atlas Public Policy, kind of thinking about, there's a lot of really great resources out there for analyzing vehicles and comparing gas engines to electric vehicles and what makes sense, and what can we really accomplish. And these are all really great tools. We wanted to do things in a way that is taking the best of what those tools offer, and then also building upon them and making it so that we can have constantly updated information going in, and have it in a format that's simple, straightforward, and easy to use. And so, everybody, there's over the past couple of years, it's very exciting that there's a lot of opportunities for telematics, and a lot of fleets that we work with are utilizing telematics, and that's a great resource to be able to use, where we have a data logger that is actually installed in the vehicles, and we can track quite a few different aspects of how the vehicle is run and the different operations and duty cycles of that vehicle, including on electric vehicles. We can look at how frequently it's charging, where it's running, all of these different things. But oftentimes we get kind of overwhelmed with the amount of data that comes in, and then we have to figure out what really makes sense. What do we really need to advance this and to drive this electrification effort forward? And so that's kind of the lens that we were seeing the development of the tool through. And so we also wanted it to be able to look at everything within the fleet. So we can take a snapshot of the entire fleet, analyze all of that. So whether it's a light duty vehicle, a motorcycle, a medium duty vehicle, a heavy duty vehicle, etc., transit buses, all of these different applications feed into the tool in real-time data that we're receiving from about 7 different government sources. And all of this is incorporated into the analysis that we do using a couple of data points. So to get started, we really just need these 3 data points. So the tool is very versatile, and we can customize it to make it to look at everything from emissions profiles to specific vehicle makes and models and everything in between, as well as there's a large aspect of the tool that's focused on procurement and different procurement scenarios. Whether it's financing a vehicle, leasing a vehicle, we can also build in local and state and federal incentives into the vehicles. And it's ultimately very customizable. But for us to get started, we would look at a VIN number. We actually use a VIN decoder, so that allows us to just drop a list of VINs from an Excel spreadsheet into our software, and we're able to decode all of those VINs, and it eliminates any issues that might be associated with maybe we've got the wrong year in there or some aspect of some incorrect data. If the VIN is correct, then we'll be able to identify what year, make, model that vehicle is, what kind of engine it has, etc. The annual vehicle miles traveled. So it's important that this is broken out on an annualized basis. That gives us a good understanding of what to anticipate that vehicle use to be. And so a lot of times cities or other municipal agencies or universities, they might get a subset of vehicles, use them in one department for a number of years, and then shift them, for instance, to another department, and that use cycle is different. So we like to look at what is that vehicle use actually going to be. And so, for instance, if it has shifted to another department, we know exactly what to expect from that vehicle and what the operators are going to expect. And then also the anticipated service life of the vehicle. So that would be the last of this sort of initial run that we would do. And that gives us an understanding of how long we anticipate to have that vehicle in service. And that's how we calculate the total cost of ownership. Oftentimes there's a higher upfront capitalized cost on a lot of the electric vehicles, though not all. There are on some of them. And so we're really trying to zero in on how many years do we have to have the vehicle in service at this level in order to start achieving cost parity and then competing with the traditional internal combustion engine vehicles. And so we delve into all of those different aspects by using these 3 initial data points. So once we do run the analysis and we produce a report, these are just a couple of examples of what is produced in the report. A lot of our thinking behind how we designed the results to come out is so that we can have sustainability professionals or procurement officials or fleet managers be able to look at this information and have visuals that we can then point to and we can use for presentations or to make the case to transition to electric vehicles from a cost savings perspective primarily. So that's really our primary driver, is looking at cost savings. Although if you notice in figure 3 here, we've got a number of different aspects: insurance, financing, maintenance, fuel, taxes, etc. We can build all of those different aspects into the tool, and we can really get very granular with the kind of results that we're looking at, just depending on what we're needing to report on. All of this is really kind of focused on figuring out what is our low-hanging fruit. And so there's a lot of excitement. Obviously, there's a lot going on in the EV space right now, and it all can be very overwhelming. And so we really try to break this down into kind of a year by year, case by case basis. It's very easy to understand. And so with these three categories here that I'll highlight in figure 3. So at the top, we've got our maintenance costs. Next, we've got our fuel costs, and then depreciation costs. So with using these three categories, we're able to identify within the light duty fleet, for instance. So we'll actually break all these different figures out into the different vehicle categories. Where is our greatest opportunity? So obviously motorcycles, that's a very popular application for a lot of the police, and there's significant cost savings there, in a large part due to the fuel and maintenance costs. I get the question oftentimes about how do we account for that increased upfront cost of the electric vehicles to begin with, and that will be represented in that blue chart right there, or the blue line in that bar graph, and that's our depreciation. So what's important to kind of couch all of this in is in the fact that this analysis is truly a snapshot of what is available in today's market using today's costs. So for instance, if we're working with a fleet manager that is very much looking at resale value of vehicles, and they're operating their fleet on with a strategy that is taking that into account, then it's important to think about down the road when these vehicles come out of service, what is that depreciation? What is that cost going to be? So that is to say that currently electric vehicles tend to depreciate faster than a traditional internal combustion engine vehicle. And if we put a vehicle into service today, that vehicle might be in service 8, 10, 12 years. And in fact, quite a few cities that we're working with do have vehicles from even longer than 12 years that are still in the fleet. But the reason that I mention this is because with different advancements in battery recycling and mineral extraction from those batteries, that depreciation figure will go down. And we're going to see an interesting flip coming in the next couple of years, especially with some of the recent investments in recycling technologies that basically make those vehicles going into service today more valuable down the road, because we're able to take those minerals out. So that leads me to this second graph here, the likelihood graph. This is actually a new feature that we've been able to add to the tool in the past couple of months, which is a market forecasting tool. So we're using a variety of sources, looking at the cost per kilowatt hour to manufacture batteries and a couple of other different factors that allow us to project out 5, 10, 20, 30 years down the road. So that, for instance, if we're putting in a heavy duty vehicle in 5 years, we know that that vehicle is going to be achieving cost parity, so it makes sense from a cost savings perspective in X date. And we need to have charging stations installed and up and running and ready to go so that we can be prepared to take advantage of when those vehicles are very much more cost effective. So just kind of delving in a little bit more into the report that we'll put together that we can develop with the Drive tool. Once we've identified that low-hanging fruit, we're also then able to break it down into dollars and cents. And I really like this aspect of it. This is kind of the meat and potatoes of the report. And we're able to look at within the different segments, what real, kind of real world cost per mile examples or actual cost per mile are we seeing in terms of savings between an electric vehicle and an internal combustion engine vehicle. So figure 6 here, you'll see that's the light duty segment that's broken out into the different categories. And within those categories, we see the conventional vehicle is representative of actual vehicles with their use case built into the tool. So that's currently what's in the fleet. And then our EV alternative. And so what that would cost, either what that delta is, how much more expensive is it, or how much can we save? The one thing that was very exciting, and I was, as soon as we got the update for the 2022 year models, I was messaging furiously the development team, like, yeah, this is great because now we have pickup trucks. So as the pickup truck class continues to expand and we get more options there, we're able to look at all of these different options and opportunities here. And so we're already showing 1 cent savings on the electric alternative. In this case, it is an F-150 Lightning. So we've got also then in figure 7 here, kind of a breakdown, the percent savings that we would anticipate. And what's really helpful in an aspect of this particular aspect of the results is that we've got broken down the number of vehicles within the fleet currently that would fit our recommended vehicle and show a cost savings. And so, for instance, this Ford E-Transit, there's one of them that we could transition at a 23% savings. But, if we're really trying to think about if we're going to focus our limited resources and energies on maybe one department or one vehicle application, this is how we can identify where, where we can really have the greatest impact. And if we transition all of one vehicle to an electric vehicle, for instance, then we can use this to guide our decision-making process. And so we've got 26 vehicles that would be a good fit to transition to an F-150 Lightning, and 3.03% cost savings is definitely eye-catching. And then lastly, we'll also be able to produce within the entire fleet or subset of fleet. A lot of times I'll run the full fleet and then break it into what vehicles are coming out of service in the next year, 2 years, so that we can really focus on getting that charging in place and ready to accept those vehicles into the fleet. We've got our top 100 vehicles from a cost savings perspective, starting at the most cost savings and then going on down the line. Again, the VIN number there at the bottom in figure 9 represents an existing vehicle in the fleet. Then we've got what kind of vehicle that is, and then the recommended EV alternative, and then the average percent savings from that vehicle through transitioning to electric. So we can produce all of that, and then that really gives us kind of what we need to focus on over the next couple of years as we continue to work to transition our fleet to electric. And then with that, I'll hand it over to Cher. And Cher, you just let me know when you're ready to advance the slides.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jared. So Jared's going to be advancing the slides for me. Good afternoon again, everybody. So Jared just totally wowed you, totally blew your minds with this great dashboard for rapid vehicle electrification that the EC has developed this year in collaboration with the Atlas Public Policy Group. And now we're going to take you to step 2. So step 1 was assessing your fleet, figuring out which vehicles would be the best to transition based on their total cost of ownership. And I'm seeing in the chat, no, there is no cost to use the Drive tool. Really, the only cost would be your investment of time. So please engage with us and we will take you through it. We can do a lot of these analysis for you, but we really want to empower municipalities and the staff on these cities, these fleets to undertake this themselves. So again, happy to provide that kind of guidance. And I can put the link to the Drive tool in the chat as well. Yes, so after you assess your fleet and you find those opportunities, now you're going to be moving towards purchasing. What are your procurement options for transitioning selected vehicles in your fleet to electric options? And the Drive tool, Jared might have mentioned, it does, because it maps each fleet's, every one of the fleet's ICE or internal combustion engine vehicles to a comparable electric vehicle option. You can see which models are going to give you those cost savings. But then where do you buy these models? The Eevee Purchasing Collaborative is here to help. So next slide, please, Jared. Thank you. Jared and I, we both work on this program. It's called the Climate Mayor's Eevee Purchasing Collaborative. It is really a knowledge sharing network of municipalities across America that have been planning for electric vehicles, purchasing them and deploying them to a lot of success. And so it's called a purchasing collaborative, but again, it's a knowledge sharing network. It is a partnership between 3 organizations, the Electrification Coalition, where Jared and I work, the Climate Mayor's Program, which is a nonprofit organization of mayors. It's basically like a subset of the U.S. Conference of Mayors. And then Sourcewell. Sourcewell is our third partner, and they really handle all the financial transactions. Anytime you want to purchase something, you purchase using Sourcewell, because Sourcewell is a North American cooperative procurement entity. Cooperative procurement means that all their contracts, all the contracts that they have for equipment and resources are sourced directly with manufacturers. They're all competitively sourced contracts. They're competitively priced, or I'm sorry, they're transparently priced. And Sourcewell makes all of its contracts available for municipalities and other public fleets to use free of cost. And the partnership between Climate Mayors and Sourcewell was facilitated because in 2011, I'm sorry, not 2011, 2018, climate mayors, these are mayors that made definitive commitments to reducing greenhouse gas emissions in their jurisdictions. They all banded together to say, we are 25 cities strong. We represent X number of constituents, and we have the purchasing power. We have the intent to purchase X number of vehicles, and we are committed to making all of them electric. And then Sourcewell was able to leverage that collective purchasing power through its contracts with manufacturers, with vehicle manufacturers, to secure favorable prices on these vehicles, on these electric vehicles, and also charging equipment, and also financing solutions that municipalities can use to pay for these vehicles and charging equipment. So next slide, please, Jared. Yeah, when it comes to purchasing, this collaborative effect is able to provide a number of benefits. So for instance, usually municipalities are not able to take advantage of the federal tax credit because they don't carry a tax burden as a public entity. However, because of the collaborative nature of the Sourcewell contracts, Sourcewell, one of Sourcewell's contracts, or Sourcewell was able to deploy one of its contracts with National Cooperative Leasing, which is a leasing entity that almost exclusively does business with public fleets. So they help National Cooperative Leasing helps public fleets finance their purchases, and they do that through a lease. And the lease allows non-tax burden public entities to access the federal tax credit because it's that leasing organization, which is a private entity. They're going to be able to take advantage of that tax benefit, and then in their lease structure with the municipality, as they help them finance electric garbage truck or a pair of electric vehicles or some charging equipment, they're able to pass that tax credit on to the final consumer, which is the municipality. And so that allows municipalities to access a lower cost for these resources. This equipment helps them to preserve capital because they're using their operating expenses to pay those lease burdens. And then, of course, with the collaborative purchasing, there are a lot of procurement benefits as well. So there's enhanced vehicle availability. This is a huge benefit to using Sourcewell as opposed to perhaps relying on the state contracts that most municipalities are very comfortable and have a very long and established working relationship with. In a lot of the cases, those state contracts, they only have a few vehicles, but with the contracts that we're able to access through Sourcewell, the Eevee Purchasing Collaborative is able to access a number of vehicles, not just light duty vehicles, but also medium and heavy duty electric vehicles, also electric school buses, and again, charging equipment as well. So light duty vehicles from a number of manufacturers, and then also a number of different medium and heavy duty vehicles as well, everything from electric buckets trucks to electric refuse trucks, garbage haulers, litter sweepers, and other medium and heavy duty types of equipment. Again, those executed contracts are available free for municipalities to use. And so I mentioned the vehicle purchasing, the financing, and the charging. So really all EV ecosystem aspects. Yeah, so this is just an example of the cost savings that are available to municipalities that are able to leverage the Sourcewell contracts and the lease financing to secure that federal tax credit. So for the 2020 Nissan Leaf, again, this was a very this model was in very short supply, but we did have access to it through the collaborative because again, the Sourcewell contracts, they are negotiated at the manufacturer manufacturer level. So when you place a purchase order using Sourcewell, those orders go straight to the order bank at the vehicle manufacturing facility, and they can develop a few, or they develop the vehicles to your specifications. But these order windows are kind of dynamic, especially in 2020 and in this year with all the supply chain crunches. There wasn't a big, or there wasn't a long window of opportunity. So we really try to push this information out to our engaged climate mayors, cities, to let them know when they can order these vehicles and take advantage of these savings. So the invoice price for this specific vehicle, just over $30,000. They were able, fleets using Sourcewell were able to access not just the EV tax credit, but also the government fleet incentive. So that's a specific incentive that that municipalities can access using Sourcewell's factory orders. And then to access the federal tax credit, you would have to undertake a lease. And the shortest lease we offer is like a 24-month lease, because that enables the National Auto Fleet Group, the lessor, to monetize that federal tax credit. So there are some fees related to that. That's just the cost of the transaction. But then you pay the 24-month lease lump payment there. That's over $7,000 less than the invoice price. So a lot of money that you're able to save by layering those two incentives, the government fleet incentive and then also the federal EV tax credit, which municipalities can take advantage of because of the financing or lease structure. Right. And so as I was mentioning, the EV Purchasing Collaborative is really a knowledge sharing network. So yes, we offer municipalities assistance with the Drive tool. We can help them assess their fleet. We can help them plan for electric vehicles. We can help them plan out charging infrastructures. And we can also take this last step, which is after you've assessed your fleet for EV opportunities, after you've purchased electric vehicles, how can we support future electrification on your fleet? So how can we make sure that it's not just one vehicle that you bought and one charging station? We want to set the stage for incremental improvements. And so we've put together this EV Policy Toolkit, which is really going to support the future purchasing of electric vehicles. So we have guidance on how to green your fleet, or develop like a clean fleet plan for your city. And how do we set baselines for charging infrastructure development in your city facilities and around your communities to support the further adoption of electric vehicles on your fleet, but also consumer adoption in your community. And so the EV Policy Toolkit, it outlines several categories. So the fleet, consumer adoption, charging infrastructure, but also how do cities support freight electrification, and how do they approach a multi-sector initiatives as well to support, again, like a holistic view of vehicle electrification, and how do we support vehicle electrification and those emissions reductions benefits in the entire jurisdiction. So the toolkit is available on our website, and I can put the link for that as well. But next slide, please, Jared. Yeah, and so just to recap, again, the 3 successful steps for successful fleet electrification. Number 1, you have to assess the opportunity. You can do that using the Drive tool, or by talking with myself, by talking with Jared, engaging with our Climate Mayors EV Purchasing Collaborative, and we can help you plan this out if you have the intent to procure EVs for your fleet. 2, we can help you explore the procurement options, what is available to you, what is within your budget, and what makes sense given your project timelines. And then the 3rd one is to build a strong policy framework. That's where the EV Policy Toolkit comes in. It outlines and provides examples from a number of cities across the US, what kinds of policies have been most successful and how they've undertaken them. Yeah, and then honestly, I would say that the 4th step is honestly to the fourth step for successful fleet electrification is to celebrate your electrification and to make sure that these wins, these benefits, these achievements are highlighted. And that is a large part of what the collaborative does already. So check out the Drive tool. The link is there. You can check out the Eevee Policy Toolkit. I'll also put in the chat. We've also recently released an Eevee funding and financing guide for cities. So again, if you assess the opportunities on your fleet, you are reviewing procurement opportunities, how do you finance them? Funding and financing, a very big resource, a very big gap in knowledge we found. So we've developed this funding and financing guide to help cities amp up their transportation electrification. And then, yeah, reach out to the EC and help us highlight your municipality, highlight your works, your achievements. That's a great way to get more investment in your region and to rank yourselves above the leading fleets in this country. That kind of promotion can be really helpful as you seek out those grant opportunities, especially. Yeah, and we want to support continued fleet electrification. Next slide, please, Jared. Yeah, and that's really the end. This is our contact information. I will find the link to the policy toolkit and also add that to the chat. I put the funding and financing guide there. Yeah, and so this is our contact information. Please reach out to us. Tell us about what you're doing. If you need any assistance, we're happy to help. And yeah, hope to hear from some of you soon. Thank you.
So I will turn it over to Billy and Andrew to talk about the SRP Fleet Assessment Program and some of the efforts that they're doing with regards to cities. So gentlemen, take it away.
Yeah. Sounds good. Well, yeah, and Cher, I got to hear your presentation about 6 months ago, so it's good to get an update on what you guys are doing. I feel like we all have a piece of the puzzle. I don't know if you feel like that in this electrification space, but everybody's got a little piece that they bring to the table to be part of it. I think SRP's got one piece of it, and we'll dive into some of these offerings today. So for SRP customers, commercial customers, business, governmental, next slide. SRP came out with a 2035 goal that they want to enable 500,000 EVs in the SRP service territory by 2035. That's an awesome goal and a big commitment on SRP's part to play a leadership role, I think, in the transformation to an electrification transportation initiatives. And so, in part of that is we came out a few years ago with just a level 2 charging rebate. And we'll get into some other things later on, but that's SRP's commitment. I know Brian's on here with us, and he and I, talk back and forth all the time about what we can do now and what's coming up in the future. So SRP's made a significant, commitment towards the enablement of the EVs in the territory here. So how that translates to this program year, we have a goal of installing or supporting 800 charging ports for this fiscal year. Next year, I'm aware it goes up to 1,200, so about a 50% gap increase. Last year it was 100%. So we'll continue to see some large gains in this area as we help customers make the transition. But we also have new for this year, and this is what I'll be turning over to Andrew to talk about, is a fleet assessment program to help governmental agencies or all of our customers develop that EV roadmap. We have a few residential programs at the moment. One is a wiring allowance for new construction and a discounted EV charger. So if you're a residential customer of SRP, you get $250 off. They have something called the SRP Marketplace. So if you're in the market for one for yourself or your home, check out the SRP Marketplace. Next slide. So the business EV charger program currently is $1,500 to $4,000 per port. It's $4,000 if you're governmental, a nonprofit, a school, or multifamily. I think everybody on the call is probably government or schools. Is that a fair statement? So you guys drew the lucky straw this year, and you got the 4,000 report. So that definitely puts a nice dent in the infrastructure side of it. Doesn't help quite so much on the vehicle side, but hopefully that gets us a little bit further down the road. Our process is very simple. There's no pre-approval. You apply for the rebate. Once it's energized, you turn in a signed terms and conditions along with the invoices, and that's pretty much it. You can email it in, you can put it online. We also give you up to 15 months to actually turn in the paperwork, theoretically. So we give you until July 30th to turn in your paperwork for projects completed somewhere between May 1st and April 30th. So that's the electric vehicle charging program that we have. You'll see in the foreground, we typically see dual ports. So in this vein, for at least governmental, 2 ports on one station would be $8,000. Okay, next slide. So what we found out this past year was, like, everybody's on board. I mean, there's so much excitement in this group. I mean, when I talk to all of you guys, I mean, you know, Danae or Karen or any of our municipalities that Brian and I get a chance to interact with, man, everybody's so excited about going to Eevee, and so, but it was how do we get there? How do we develop a plan? And so what we wanted to come up with is a way to build a trade ally network here in the Phoenix Valley geared towards electric vehicles, as well as give our municipalities and schools some funding to put a plan together, because we've seen, you know, at least one valley city had a RFP out. Not sure exactly how much it was, but I think it was, you know, a fair amount of money. So to the extent the SRP can support that, that's kind of what we were thinking when we came up with this, what we're calling Electrification Qualified Service Provider, EQSP. Next slide. And so this EQSP really is a group of trade allies that, you know, have applied and been through a training to be able to offer to our customers fleet assessment offerings. So ICF offers this, and that's what Andrew will get into on what that looks like. But it's really open to anyone in really anywhere that wants to meet our criteria and help, you know, our customers convert to electric. Next slide. So here's the amount of money we can put towards a fleet assessment. If it's a light duty vehicle, if there are 20 or more just light duty, then it's 14,000. If it's 50 or more, they can get up to 20,000. If it's medium or heavy duty, there's different criteria. If it's a mixed fleet, you only need 10 to get to the 14 or 20 to get to the 20. And most municipalities or even educational groups will have different classes of vehicles. So obviously you don't need quite as many to be able to qualify. But the process here is that once you apply for the rebate and we give you a pre-approval, if you've been through like custom pre-approval processes, we tell you exactly how much the assessment is worth. You would do the study, and then we would give you half of the amount of the funding, and then we would give you the other half whenever you installed electric vehicles or electric vehicle charging stations that was part of the study. Next slide. So the summary for the electric vehicle rebate program is you get up to $20,000 for a fleet assessment, $1,500 a port if you're not a government, nonprofit, or school, or $4,000 if you are a government or nonprofit or school. That is really the summary of our electric vehicle program. I'm also going to go ahead and throw this up, Andrew, the next slide. We have an electrification program, which is really on-road electrification, which I won't get into, but you know, hopefully when the slide goes out, if this applies to you and you're interested in off-road electrification, we certainly have some rebates to include on that. Next slide. These are other non-road assessment fees that can, the different types of technologies and the breadth that non-road electrification can include. And again, this is just kind of a listing. If someone has an interest in some of these, feel free to reach out to us. Next slide. And at that, I'm going to turn it over to Andrew to really kind of talk about what the fleet assessment includes and a sample report. And I'll turn it over to Andrew.
Yeah, thanks, Billy. Yeah, so Billy's kind of giving you kind of the rundown of the programs that are out there with SRP. One of those being that fleet assessment. So here I'm running through just a sample fleet assessment that we would run through a similar process if we were to be involved with one of the municipalities on the call to walk through this process with you. Here, I'll go to the next slide. The first piece of that being kind of taking the inputs, getting that existing baseline of your fleet. So a lot of times this is the biggest lift for municipalities, is just getting all your data in one place, having that data in a way that we have those vehicles listed out all in one place. I think Electrification Coalition also mentioned, similar kinds of intake data pieces. So, looking at mileage is an important piece of that, and looking at some of those retirement criteria, things like that. So if those things are not available to your fleet, we do have assumptions that we can fill in those gaps, fill in the blanks. But the more real life, real world data that we get, the more accurate our assessment can be. So once we have those inputs, we're going to this middle area here, the calculations. So we have an Eevee library of 400 plus vehicles. I think the question came up on the last presentation, how often are you keeping that updated? So we do try and keep that updated multiple times a year.
Excuse me, Andrew, I just wanted to let you know your presenter mode is showing.
This, okay.
So yeah. I didn't know if you wanted to change your presentation.
Yeah. Let's do that. Thanks for that.
Yeah, better. Thank you.
There we go. Okay, thanks. All right, so here in the middle, we talked about the different calculations that we're going to take into account. So we have our Eevee library. We'll look at the different costs that go along with those vehicles, the vehicle capital costs, annual fuel costs, maintenance costs. Take all of those together, and then we'll give our recommendation. So the output is this final bullet right here. With most of our assessments, we will just look at if the total cost of ownership for the battery electric vehicle is less than an internal combustion engine, then we will make that recommendation. We can make adjustments on that depending on the municipality. If let's say, maybe it's just 10% more expensive for the internal combustion engine for the battery electric compared to the ICE vehicle, we can still make that recommendation and kind of tweak a lot of those calculations, those inputs, and make sure we're giving the proper outputs there. I'll go to the next slide here. So here, this is just an example looking at where we start. This is our starting point. So that first bullet on that last slide, just getting your existing data, breaking it out into these different categories, and then we'll use this existing data here and compare that to our Eevee library. Here on the next slide, we'll look at what incentives are out there. So as Billy already talked about, we have the business EV charging rebate from SRP. We have that listed for your region. We do also have this EPA grant program here. That's a federal program this program, I believe, did run out for last year for those incentives. So it is something that we're constantly keeping a look, keep an eye open on what incentives are out there and if they are available. So this is definitely, the second one is definitely one to keep on the radar. We'll see if that program is refunded for the coming year. Next, so if we do run this analysis, here is an example of what one of the graphs you might get at the end of the report. So on the left in 2020, this is your entire existing fleet, and then each year as your vehicles come up for retirement, we will recommend either, if the bar at the top of that 2021 bar, the green is the Eevee replacements that we're recommending, and the gray is internal combustion engine replacement. So we're taking a holistic look at your fleet as vehicles are coming up for retirement. We're not just automatically saying, okay, here, let's go with a battery electric as your replacement. We will only recommend that if the total cost of ownership for that vehicle is less than the ICE alternative. So a lot of times this is what we'll see. Not 100% of the fleet is being electrified. Depending on all of those initial inputs, we won't recommend a battery, an electric alternative, if there's a cheaper alternative of just keeping the internal combustion engine. From looking at past analyses we've done, a lot of times this will happen. So these ICE replacements, let's say a vehicle really isn't being driven much annually. Let's say just a couple miles every week. Those fuel costs and those maintenance costs are going to be really low. So those benefits that you do get from going to that electric alternative just aren't there, and the total cost of ownership at the time we're doing this analysis just isn't there yet. Obviously, as we update our model, as the efficiencies and the prices come down, this graph may change in the future, but as it is right now, with the information we have, this is often what we get, something around half of the vehicles being recommended for EV replacement. Along with that, so after we take your entire fleet, we analyze which vehicles should be replaced with electric alternatives, adding up all of those vehicles. So let's say it was 848 vehicles. We take that, create out all the impacts that creates for your organization. So you'll have a total cost of ownership savings, fuel savings, maintenance savings, and then on the right side here, these are a lot of different ways of kind of visualizing the CO2 emission reductions and trying to equate that to some more kind of relatable topics. Here we have vehicle recommendations. So with your final report, after we do the entire analysis of your vehicle fleet, let's say we have an example in here, you have 58 sedans. With that total cost of ownership calculation that we do, in this example, we've recommended converting 20 of those to electric alternatives. And we just show one example of a model, and we always show the cheapest model. So oftentimes for sedans, we'll see Nissan Leaf here. And so that's your lowest total cost of ownership vehicle for the replacement for sedans, giving a financial savings, giving a greenhouse gas emissions reduction. And then what I'm going to start getting into in future slides is this last piece is the electric vehicle supply equipment recommendation. So as long as a level 2 charger is enough and can charge your vehicle fast enough, we will make the recommendation for 1 level 2 charger for every vehicle. That's a pretty conservative estimate. We can make the customization and try and reduce and show less chargers per vehicle, but 1-to-1 is kind of the safe bet, the conservative bet for that. And then if there are vehicles that have shorter charging times, we will recommend DC fast chargers for those vehicles based on the data and the usage that we're getting on those fleets. So actually in this chart, I believe we had for certain recent fleets, we had some light duty pickups that we had a mix depending on how much and how often they were used of level 2 chargers and DC fast chargers recommended for that fleet. Here on the next slide, this is kind of a breakdown of that the model that I highlighted in the previous chart. So for a specific model of vehicle, so here I'm highlighting a light duty pickup, Eevee model total cost of ownership comparison. So I think the Electrification Coalition had the same conclusion that they're predicting that the Ford F-150 Lightning is going to be a great alternative to gasoline light duty pickups, and our model's finding that same conclusion. So I think a lot of municipalities are very excited for that F-150 to come out, and as we're predicting this now, those F-150s are going to be a good alternative to the gasoline models that we have right now. Also with our report, once we've added all the chargers together, so we have a number of recommended level 2 chargers, a number of DC fast chargers, and that from that total number, we'll get a total equipment cost and a total installation cost. So those are estimates we have from our assumptions in our model. We'll deliver that total equipment cost and that total installation cost to the municipality with that final report. But beyond that, I'll go to the next slide. An important piece of that is breaking it down even further. So if those chargers can be broken down by site, so I'm showing just an example here with 4 sites. If we can get the exact number of chargers, level 2 and DC fast, and the demand in kilowatts, that's when you can truly really start to have that conversation with your utility. So with SRP on what some of those utility site costs may look like. So breaking it down and working with municipalities to get to this level is really really an important goal in kind of getting to that next step of purchasing vehicles and purchasing the chargers that go along with those vehicles. So this step right here, yeah, this is a huge piece of the puzzle. Finally, I have just 2 summary pages. So here we're just showing the total cost of ownership graphed out. The blue line you can see for the first 3 years. I think it's 2 or 3 years in this example. The total cost of the Eevee replacement is higher, so there is some of that initial investment. But if you're looking over 30 years and over the life of some of these vehicles, it's a no-brainer. So as long as you can take that longer view, look at the overall cost of these battery electric alternatives, it's just a slam dunk in terms of total cost. And then along with that, obviously there's lots of greenhouse gas emissions. So this is just another example of a summary graph that we'll give with that final report, showing that greenhouse gas emission reduction. So, business as usual is that top gray line, and then even though we're not replacing the entire fleet with the replacements that we are recommending, you're seeing huge reductions in greenhouse gas emissions. That's it. I'll skip over here to our contact page. I haven't kept an eye on the chat, so I don't know if there's any questions or anything we have with these.
Yeah, actually, we have several questions for you, Andrew. So the first one was from Lars, and he asks, what are the rebate options for commercial businesses that may?
Yeah, so that would be $1,500 port. They're still eligible for this fleet assessment up to $20,000. So, happy to talk through his options or any situation. Yeah.
Great. Okay. And then we have, my question was, how often should the fleet assessment be conducted? Is this something you do like every other year? Is it something that you do every 3 to 5 years or just once? I would imagine with technology changing so quickly, it might actually be a good idea to put it on a certain frequency.
Yeah, and I could speak a little bit about what we see kind of across the country. I know, SRP just does the upfront assessment, but I think there have been some other utilities that have tried to kind of incorporate kind of an update annually with that as these different EV models are coming out. But yeah, it is kind of balancing that the financial aspect of it with trying to get a good picture of what your electrification process is going to look like. I think looking back at all my slides, kind of highlighting the most important one is really determining where those chargers are going to be located. That can really help you nail down, how many chargers you need, what some of those costs of installing that infrastructure is going to be, and then having that conversation with SRP to really nail down any of the utility side costs.
Okay.
Yeah, Billy, I don't know if you had anything else on that.
Yeah, I mean, we're still working through that. I mean, it's going to be kind of dependent on, the rapid change in the financial or the vehicle offerings. I think that's going to kind of be the bellwether. My gut feel is it's probably every 18 months. I mean, I think most people are looking at a 10-year time frame probably. So I think some periodic time frame, and I'm guessing that's going to be 18 months, but really that's still to be determined.
Okay. All right. I'm going to have Karen's questions last. So Karen, I'll let you pipe in and ask some of yours that you had asked earlier. But Chris Maccabee with the county had asked, can the assessment be for an entire fleet utilized, say countywide, or would they only be for vehicles utilized in SRP territory? Yeah,
that's a great question. The bar is such that, I mean, as long as you're looking at 50 light duty vehicles that are in SRP territory, we don't mind if you pull in the other ones that aren't served by SRP. It's just that to meet our minimum requirement, it's got to be at least 50 in the SRP territory, at least for light duty. If it's mid or heavy duty, it goes down to 20 or 30 or a mixed fleet. But we recognize that, Brian and I have kind of looked at this 100 ways from Sunday. You all probably are aware that, APS serves the downtowns of most of the municipalities in the valley. And so we have to kind of work together and collaborate and do the best we can with what we got. But we're specifically wanting to incentivize things in SRP's area, but we're not excluding APS. It's just that you need to meet SRP's minimum criteria. Is that clear?
And to chime in on about like fleet assessments, it's almost more work to try and parse out the data. What if you have a full set of vehicle data that covers the entire county, it's almost more work to try and split it out. So
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's no set model. I mean, we've seen some that they say, okay, let's just do all the light duty pickup trucks. I mean, there's nothing that says you got to take every one of your vehicles and run it through this. I mean, you're certainly welcome to, but I mean, you can. The numbers for many on this call are so many that, I mean, you can just dive into one area and maybe hit the next one next year. You know, as you know, I think what we've heard today is that there are one or two, you know, lower hanging fruits that you might want to explore. You know, now and as new models come out, look at those at another time.
Okay, well, that's good. It's got some flexibility with it then. All right. Mackenzie McGuffey with Valley Metro asked, do you create fleet transition plans based on today's EV capabilities, or do you also factor in predicted improvements in range?
Yeah, so our first of all, for models, the EV library has you know, all the current models. I think we go out 2 years. We might go out 3 years. But we don't want to go, you know, predict any further than that in terms of available models. I think we stick it right around 2 or 3 years. So in terms of those models, that is factored in. And then we do have predictions over the life of this for reduction in fuel costs. I think we look at the dynamics of the electricity costs over those years as well. And then I think there's also a factor of the improved efficiencies of those vehicles as well. So improved efficiencies and reductions in the initial capital costs. So we do try and kind of predict all of those things out, but obviously, I think, you know, redoing that analysis is the more accurate way to get that data.
Thank you. All right. I'm going to ask Karen to jump in at this point, if she's still on. Sorry.
Yeah, no
to
worries.
ask her questions, because you
Yeah,
had
and I'll
quite a
try to
few.
Yeah, I'll try to make it short, and I don't have to get all of them answered because I know we're running short on time, but I always get into the weeds. So I looked at the example that you had, Andrew, and you had a cost. So your EV library, where does that pull from? Because Jared and Cher talked about their drive tool pulls from a larger OEM subset. So where does your library pull from to get, and is that where you get the cost per EV?
Yeah. So we have our library is actually managed internally, so it's manually updated as models come online, and then we do have filters for procurement. So we do have the MSRP for those vehicles, and then we have a toggle depending on if it is a county or a municipality that's going through a state-run procurement. We do have adjusted costs that we apply to the library.
Okay, so to that, I know you also made a statement that your report has a 1-to-1 ratio on one EV gets one charger. I've typically had this conversation, and it's more like a 5-to-1, we think. And it really probably depends on duty cycles and how that vehicle is used. But if we, a municipality, wanted to change some of the inputs in your tool, such as a cost, if we could get the vehicle lower than what you're plugged in for, and if we decided to go with a 5-to-1 ratio as opposed to a 1-to-1, are those inputs changeable in your model?
Absolutely. Yeah. So we, I kind of didn't get into it. I kind of jumped right into some of the deliverables of our, you know, our final graphs. I feel like a lot of people want to see those, so jumped right into those. But we actually do have an initial conversation. We call it our intake call, where we have take the first shot at getting your existing fleet data. So we have a spreadsheet. We ask you to fill that out. We talk about any gaps that are in that. And then we talk about any assumptions that we're going to be making with that final report. So that's you know, we actually have a PowerPoint presentation. It's, you know, one of the assumptions, one of the bullets is, hey, you know, we're going with a 1-to-1 ratio. Do you like that? Or do you, you know, if you know 5-to-1 is the ratio of chargers to vehicles that you want, then we can easily change that.
Okay, and just one other quick question. So the installation cost, where was that established at? How did you come up with that?
So we just have a set per charger installation cost that we've seen from averages nationwide. And that's why I was kind of talking about getting more site specific, because that covers the customer side, the customer cost. So conduit, panel, breakers, all those kinds of things that the customer, you know, the property owner is going to be responsible for to get some of those utility side costs. You really do need to get specific.
Sure.
Okay, we're at 123 Main Street. Let's look around and see what transformers nearby and if that needs to get upgraded, or you know, things, conversations like that. Yeah.
And so, Andrew, to that, does ICF and the SRP program actually do the boots on the ground field review of each site's electrical capacity?
No, so we try and get that data from the municipality.
From the owner, okay.
Yeah, so and work together. Some municipalities have it listed so that it is already a column, and it's pretty simple. Hey, this address, this vehicle, this sedan right here goes with this address. Some are like based on department, and so we just we'll break it out by department, and then there's another conversation that has to happen. And we've seen we've seen kind of the full range of how specific that can get. That does feel like the biggest conversation to have.
It is. Hey, thanks for the information, you and Billy and Jared and Cher. Really appreciate you guys jumping in on the call today and providing information.